Much of the week was consumed with the drama over the United Kingdom, which is good and serious business for people who are living in Great Britain. But what lessons might it have for the rest of us?
Look, at one level, Britain is unique. They went through Brexit. They've had some unique political challenges that have taken place within their Tory party. We've rarely seen the kind of extreme incompetence that was represented by the original Truss proposals. But I think there are two lessons that policymakers around the world need to heed. The first is that things can change extraordinarily fast if you lose credibility. Just as it takes a long time to grow a forest, but you can burn it down very quickly, something similar is true with respect to credibility and confidence. And I think at a time of rising government debts and rising interest rates, that's a lesson to be careful that policymakers in many different countries need to take account of. I would say the second, more specific lesson just goes to the potential instability in government debt markets. And that's got both a macroeconomic aspect, that if your deficit projection starts to get out of control and your real interest rates start to rise rapidly, you can get into a kind of doom loop. And it also has to do with liquidity in the markets and the possibility that you'll get a situation where there'll be selling, but there won't be buying, which will beget a kind of liquidation cycle. And I think given the magnitude of the increases in interest rates that you're seeing in other parts of the world, that's something that policymakers are going to have to be very careful of. I thought Secretary Yellen was right to warn about issues around illiquidity in the U.S. Treasury markets. I think we're going to need to be watching our own fiscal projections in the United States very carefully, because I think they're going to look different with current market interest rates. If you factor in the recession that's likely to come, that's going to have some significant effects. If you factor in all the different steps that are being taken, whether it's the student loan debt relief or the emergency funding that's going to take place because of the hurricane in Florida, or the increases in national security expenditures that I think are almost inevitable given what's happening in other parts of the world, I suspect that the fiscal issue is going to need sooner or later to be back on the table in the United States. So I think that we can be amused, those of us who don't live there, by some of the things that are happening in Britain. But if we think of it as an experience that's entirely outside of any kinds of concerns that other countries could have, that would be a real mistake.
Well, and Larry, as you say, we have to perhaps pay much more attention to the fiscal side, be a bit more responsible. That's at the same time that many people, and you included, are warning that we may well be headed to a recession here. In the past several years, it's thought that if there's a recession, we can just write some fiscal checks for it. If we don't have that ability, the way it turns out Liz Truss did not have over in the United Kingdom, what does that mean of our ability to pull out of it? What is the prospect that when we've had so many years of feast, we may be headed for some famine on higher interest rates, lower growth, and lower productivity increase?
Look, David, there's always a tendency at the beginning or in the early stages of very problematic periods to assume that everything is going to be resolved much more quickly than actually proves to be the case. Think about COVID. I was early on your program and was very worried about COVID, but I certainly didn't envision that it would be something that would still be on people's minds going into the winter of 2023. And I think it's a mistake to think that all of our economic challenges are going to be met quickly, particularly if we heed what I think would be the dangerous advice that are coming from the erstwhile members of Team Transitory, that the Fed can back off already and not carry through on the increases that the market is now expecting. I think for that to happen would be to almost guarantee a protracted period of stagflation, as we lacked both price stability and confidence. I think we need to remember that apart from anything we do with discretionary policy, we have a whole set of natural stabilizers that kick in our economy. As the economy goes down, tax collections go down. As unemployment crosses certain thresholds, there are increases in unemployment insurance payments. But unfortunately, I think we fired the fiscal cannon so strongly that there's going to be limited room for discretionary fiscal policy if we have another recession.
Finally, Larry, one of the other events of the week was the release, further release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve by President Biden, who swears this is not a political issue. But could you give us the economic potential effects of those sorts of releases?
David, I think the initial SPRO release was a powerful thing that over the last months has done a lot to contain oil prices, and I think the Biden administration was exactly right to do it strongly, do it for a long time, do it in coordination with others. I think it's much less clear how much scope there is for that policy to work further going forward. In part, that's because many of the constraints are on the refining side. In part, that's because it's a little bit like QE for the Fed. Whatever you put out there, you're going to have to get back in at some point, and that's going to have the opposite impact on oil prices. So I think you got to be careful about that instrument from here. And I think that we've all got to be very apprehensive about the degree of confrontation that now exists between the United States and what might be called the Russian-Saudi axis. This is going to be a very complex time, and I hope that we get through it while avoiding oil price spikes. My guess is that that's going to happen, but I think that's a major downside wild card from here, both with respect to inflation and with respect to recession.